If you listen to the outdated advice of rest, ice, and compression, you can expect elbow pain for 6 to 12 months. But if you follow the latest research and do the exact opposite, you can start feeling better immediately, and you can be pain-free in just a matter of weeks. There are two main components that cause golfer's elbow. Microtrauma to the tendon because it's not strong enough to withstand the stress of certain activities you perform. The tendon hasn't healed before exposing it to more trauma, and it continues to get worse and worse. That means that in order to be rid of golfer's elbow for good, you're gonna need to strengthen the tendon and increase your body's ability to heal faster. This is why old school thinking of rest, ice, compression is flawed and leaves people feeling frustrated. Rest alone only makes your tendon weaker and weaker with time. Ice and compression are both intended to reduce inflammation, but inflammation is your body sending nutrients to the injury site so it can heal. By reducing inflammation, you're actually slowing down the healing process.